Eric Sabria, your Wayne County Treasurer. If you're living in a home of a deceased family member and you're facing property tax foreclosure, the probate process can be helpful to you. If you file a probate petition and notify our office, the foreclosure proceedings will be halted during the probate process. Contact us at 313-224-5990 or email us at taxinfo@waynecounty.com. We're here to help.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Week That Was. I'm Saeed Khan, and what a week it has been. There has been a lot going on in the world. There have been platitudes of peace, and there has been war, and everything in between. So to get started, we have with us former Detroit Free Press reporter and public relations specialist, Darci McConnell. We have all the way from Portugal, one of our three attorneys, Bill Seikaly, looking all around him and noticing there's nothing Detroit around him.
Bill, isn't it cocktail hour now in Lisbon or wherever you are, Porto?
We are, yeah, exactly.
Okay. I think you should open up a bottle of that excellent local wine and just get us started into the weekend. So.
There is a lot of good wine here.
Yeah,
and
very much.
We have
sorry to
discovered
interrupt.
No problem. Some of it, I believe, is called port.
Port.
There is also attorney Joel Sklar, labor and community activist Barb Ingalls. We have veteran journalist Nancy Derringer, and of course, co-founder of Deadline Detroit, Allan Lengel. We have also, although he's not joining us, a new pope. Yes, in a very quick amount of time, with barely 4 votes at the Sistine Chapel, we have quite a surprise. Not the fact that a new pontiff has been elected, but the fact that he's an American, he's a Chicagoan, he's an Augustinian. We have, ladies and gentlemen, Robert Prevost, now to be known as Leo XIV, or Leo the 14th.
Pope Bob.
Pope Bob.
Yeah.
Pope Bob. Apparently, he's already announced that all pizza is going to be Chicago style. So glad he got the first encyclical out of the way.
It's been a surprise. It happened so quickly. I'm just curious about this. It's not like I follow the Catholics anymore. But it was only 3 votes.
It sounds like he was a shoo-in.
And nobody, I didn't see him on the list of most likely
to Pope.
Most likely people.
I was hoping for Pier Batista Pizza Balla, like any American would, Pizza Balla.
And joining us with our resident expert on Catholicism, Steve Fishman, lawyer who also just walked away from the role.
But apparently, Bill,
as you said Catholics, he got up and left. I don't know.
Francis was chosen on the second ballot, I believe. So this is not unprecedented. It's
it's not. But he did not. He wasn't on the list. I only read a couple articles. He wasn't on the list of any of the. Even the American that was on the list was the guy from New York.
Yeah, I was told there was only one American on the list, and he was, quote, worse than Benedict. And when they said the American was chosen, I'm like, oh no. But apparently, I had bad information. So
apparently he was named cardinal or promoted to cardinal only 2 years ago by Francis. He was one of 108 cardinals in the conclave that were, in fact, elevated by Francis, 108 out of 137. So it seems as though Francis pretty much had his own ideological compadres in the Sistine while this was going on, and not just a little bit critical of the Trump-Vance duet.
Yeah, the mob was going insane from what I can see. The Mogul Road is having a meltdown. Loomer went nuts, saying he's a Marxist.
And I think, Alan, we have video about that.
Yeah, great.
Right-wing social media is losing its collective mind because the new Pope cares for the poor and the sick and the plight of immigrants, and they don't like that at all. Looney Laura Loomer says Catholics don't have anything good to look forward to, just another Marxist puppet in the Vatican. This guy says the newly selected Pope trashed Trump, trashed Vance, trashed border enforcement, endorsed Dreamer-style illegal immigration, repeatedly praised and honored George Floyd, and endorsed a Democrat senator's call for more gun control, to which Cat Turd 2 said, "This is so bad." And another guy, I was considering becoming a Catholic, not anymore. What a loss for the faith.
Can you imagine really a Catholic Pope who is worried about the poor, the sick, the needy?
He must have read one of those books. You never know.
Can I just say though that this is like, I mean, I think the amount of humiliation that has been heaped on J.D. Vance in recent weeks is not only unprecedented, but it's truly satisfying to me, because it's just one, when I said early on that he was giving Burt Ward Robin energy, it's like, that's exactly what he is. This kind of like bouncing little, come at him, come on, put up your dukes, come on. And he just keeps getting KO'd time after time. I mean, he converted to Catholicism. The last pope publicly criticized him, and
and he killed him.
Yeah.
And
then the
Nancy,
new pope, what?
And Nancy, he has an Indian mother-in-law. So I mean, can it get any worse?
Does he really? Oh, you're talking about JD. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I hope the Pope doesn't. Yeah, Alan.
I'm just always so shocked. I might have mentioned this a few shows ago. When the Pope passed, I was talking to a retired DC cop who's very Catholic, very Italian. I said, "Hey, sorry about the Pope." He said, "Yeah, it's socialist." I mean, that was the first time I'm like, "Oh my God!" Like, what he's like being too Jesus-like.
Yes.
He's caring about the poor. I'm just surprised how political and how hateful the response
Catholics are.
Right.
This has been the case for a couple of papacies now. And forever, actually. It's just, and in particular, the Catholic Church, like every other institution in the entire world, has been divided between left. There's just no more middle anymore. And so you have people who think Benedict was the greatest thing since Jesus himself, and then you have people who basically were glad to see him leave. So
well, Nancy, that only stands to reason because Jesus couldn't speak German. So
I'm getting a text, by the way, from someone saying Darci McConnell also worked for the Detroit News. So
there you go.
There you go.
Somebody who worked for the Detroit News.
Well, I find it interesting because there was a recent op-ed of somebody actually trashing Trump. This is from the conservative side of the aisle, for being a Maoist because of his tariff and economic policy. So did somebody just discover Chairman Mao recently to move away from... Has Stalin now reached the rearview mirror finally, along with Lenin? I guess the only one left is the guy who was the communist leader of Albania, who was the last communist leader in Europe. So I think it was Exner or something like that. Yeah. But the Donald, apparently in a moment of I suppose humility of the limitations of his knowledge and cognitive capacity, said on Meet the Press on Sunday that he's unsure about whether it's his job to uphold the Constitution.
I think he was totally serious. He thought that's what he thinks.
He took an oath. Means nothing. That means not anything to him. I mean, we know that. He is a thug. He's the head of the family now, and he's going to exert that power like any head of the family would.
In the words of Dennis Green, he is who we thought he was. I mean, he's pretty much surrounded himself with sycophants. He is doing everything to defy the court's orders. I think Stephen Colbert said this is the dumbest interview he'd ever done. He's just,
until the next one.
He's, as I call him, a chief confabulator. So he's not going to tell the truth, except that he wants to be, a dictator.
But Darcy, it seems as though he's already.
I'm sorry.
It seems, Darcy, that he's already like laying the groundwork for passing the buck. That it's really not his responsibility. He said that he's just relying on lawyers in order to do that. I mean, this almost seems like the Ronald Reagan Iran-Contra defense.
All right.
Yeah, he's got a track record of, stories have talked before about how he tries to put some distance between himself, even though it's implicit what he wants done, right? So he gives himself some kind of cover.
Yeah, Alan.
I mean, I think it's hysterical that, Ed Martin, the interim DC U.S. attorney, has gotten opposition from the Republicans, so he's not going to get confirmed. So Trump announces, I'm going to replace him with Judge Jean Hero from Fox News, who's just so gushingly over the years of just, an apologist for Trump, an election denier and stuff like that. He doesn't get it. It's like people are saying, okay, enough already. And he goes, no, I'm going to put somebody even worse in there who's going to listen to every single thing I say.
Question whether it could be worse, but it's bad. It's very,
Can I just
very
ask you one favor, Alan?
Yes.
Stop referring to her by her personal branding as Judge Jeanine Pirro. I mean, from what I understand, this woman was like basically in charge of a traffic court somewhere on Long Island at some point. And, you know, I don't know if judges are kind of like, you know, if they can call themselves judge for life, like a Supreme Court justice can. But I would not. Yeah, I would not. I would just not. I'm not referring to Casey Means as doctor. She never finished her residency, and then she went into quackery. And I'm not referring to Jeanine Pirro as anything other than Drunky McGean. At least Hegseth has a drinking buddy now.
I'll tell you something, Nancy.
Never again.
Nancy, you get pulled over in Nassau County, and you have to go in front of a judge. You'll feel different. I'm just telling you. It's about as real as it gets.
And I think Joel and Steve will back me up on this. I've never met anybody who was ever anointed or appointed or elected as a judge, any of the three, who didn't refer to themselves for the rest of their life as judge.
Yeah.
Well, all right. I mean, it's like Dr. Laura Schlesinger.
Nor can they reach the bottom of their pockets. They all have very short arms and very deep pockets.
well, there's a couple of things that I think are important to remember. Number one is I think Laura Loomer has a disproportionate amount of influence over Trump on whom he's picking. And second of all, I think it's also important to remember that her crush for Trump may be requited because Melania Trump has apparently spent less than 2 weeks at the White House so far.
She's not in contract. You cannot make. She is not in contract. So
according to the frauds, those are not enforceable in a traffic court anyway, Nancy. Steve.
No, I was just going to say in response to Joe, I don't think that's true. I have a lot of friends of mine that are judges that are more than willing to pay, that absolutely insist that people quit calling him judge. I'd say most of our federal bench, including of all people, Robert Cleland, the most conservative judge ever. I was having lunch with him once, and I introduced him as Judge Cleland to some young lawyer, and he just got up and he said, Bob Cleland. So I think when we started as lawyers, I think there was more truth to that, although Rabbits and Pinky Kerwin and those guys were never that way. I think there
are a different ilk than state court judges, quite frankly. They have a different timber, of a different quality, and a different elegance and grace. That's been my experience in 40 years of practice.
I would say
the bar is much different than the state.
I would say, understand, I'm a guy who's always tried to stay in Wayne County and away from the federal court. So
yeah, I love the federal court. So
Bill, since you're the one from all of us right now who's overseas, what's the vibe regarding the United States and Trump from Portugal?
Well, it's been interesting. Every time people have asked us, and we've been to a lot of sites, and so people ask a lot, where are you from? And we say the States, and usually the next phrase out of our mouth is, but don't hold that against us. But people always look like, oh, really? And they want to figure out who you are. And we spent some time talking to one of the tour guides, who's just a lovely woman, who said, look, don't be so apologetic. Just because you're an American doesn't mean that you support him. Just because I'm Portuguese doesn't mean I supported our right-wing government 10 years ago. I didn't know they had a right-wing government 10 years ago. But and she's right. And people have been fairly accepting of us. We've been out to a couple of restaurants where I was very nervous about a group of Americans at other tables who were making noises like they were Trump supporters. But on the whole, people have treated us very, very well. But it's clear that they're not fond of Trump.
So were you at the McDonald's in Lisbon there, Bill?
The Pizza Hut.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because there have been two major elections around the world, both in the Anglophone world, and both of them seem to be quite strong rebukes to Trump, or what is known as the Trump effect. We've got, on the one hand, the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, who visited the White House. And Alan, I think we got a clip about that too.
Stunning turnaround. Canadian voters backed the Liberal Party, led by Prime Minister Mark Carney. Now, just a few months ago, the opposition Conservative Party was heavily favored to win. But voters were swayed by U.S. tariffs and comments from President Trump about making Canada the 51st state.
Congrats, Donald. You turned the most polite country on earth into an enemy. This is like getting a handwritten letter from Mr. Rogers that says, "Hey, neighbor, I'm going to burn your house down."
I mean, not just that, but I mean, I think we talked about last week that CKLW now is playing the national anthem midday. I'm at the point of thinking about standing up myself, but Windsor Uber Alles just doesn't really pack the same punch. But you also had the Australian election, and what was equally stunning was the loss by not only the Conservatives, who are the presumptive winners coming into the election. Peter Dutton lost his seat, just like Mr. Poilievre up in Canada. Where's Huel Perkins when we need him? Really nail that pronunciation. But the re-election of Anthony Albanese, and so it seems as though inadvertently Trump is actually creating nationalism in countries that didn't have it before, all because of himself.
Well, nationalism, or are people saying, wait a minute, this move to the right isn't working, we're going to end up like him? I'm not sure that's nationalism in and of itself.
I thought
I'm sorry, Darcy, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I thought that Dutton was more receptive to Trump than Albanese had previously been, but had kind of taken a step back. And so it did become part of at least the defining issue for the election.
Yeah, I mean, Bill, I think that, I mean, again, this is just based on CKLW and the fact that it is Stanley Cup season. But the idea of countries that seem to be rather maybe patriotic but not nationalistic, it seems as though this nationalism is a rebuke to the right as well as a rebuke to the United States. Yeah. So I don't know if you're finding that in Europe right now while you're there. Are people standing up and saying, we're European, we're Portuguese?
The only comment that I've heard about this was one of the women we were talking to said, if Spain said that we were going to become part of Spain suddenly, it wouldn't be pretty here.
Right.
And, but it tells me they're really paying attention, because I'm not, tell me why that's big news. Why is Canada becoming the 51st state big news in Portugal, of all places? People are really paying attention in Europe to what's going on.
They study history in Europe, and they know how that begins. That's how it begins.
These are two countries that the Treaty of Tordesillas literally split the Western Hemisphere between them, right? Especially in South America. Steve?
I think, in all honesty, I think just like people here were surprised at the extent to which he's trying to take things, although I don't think any of us are surprised. I think a lot of people in Europe and in the rest of the world, they knew what the first term was. They know he's an idiot. They know he's a bully. But I think that when they started seeing the kind of stuff that he and Vance and them are saying, I think it stirred, whether you call it nationalism or patriotism or whatever it is. But you start talking about, we're going to take over your country, we're going to steal Greenland from the Danes, we're going to take the Panama Canal back because of the Chinese. I think people have really recognized that this is a crazed person, and he's got a lot of crazed people with him working in the various agencies. And worse than that, there's crazed people in this country that voted for this son of a bitch. So I kind of think that, other than in Israel, where they're overjoyed, at least the right wingers are overjoyed, I think that people were just kind of like, God damn, the guy meant it this time.
Yeah.
But Steve, there are
not only do I agree with Steve, but I think that I think part of what's important here is that they're not taking it as a joke. I think in the United States, we took it as a joke for so long. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The rest of the world's not doing that right now.
But Steve, there are people waking up this morning or tomorrow morning not necessarily sure what country they're living in, because it looks like Trump wants to rename everything. Alan, I think we've got a clip about that too.
Oh, God.
We know we have the Gulf of America, formerly the Gulf of Mexico, and next week, President Trump plans to announce the U.S. will refer to the Persian Gulf as the Gulf of Arabia or the Arabian Gulf.
What is it with this guy and renaming gulfs? At least the Gulf of Mexico was on our border, but now he's just going around renaming other countries' water? The Gulf of Thailand is now the Gulf of White Lotus. The Indian Ocean is now the Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas Ocean. And the Black Sea, we're just getting rid of. No more DEI.
My prediction is by the end of the summer, Trump's youngest son is going to rename himself with the surname Trudeau. I think Melania is going to be very, very happy about that. So, you heard it here first. Well, we have on our southern border Mexico, and we have Claudia Sheinbaum, the president, who in fact has rejected the Trump plan to send American troops across the border. So it seems as though there is some pushback by world leaders to say we're just simply not going to tolerate either the rhetoric or some of the plans that are being proposed by this president. Thoughts?
If you push a bully, if you stand up to a bully, often the bully backs down. And I think that's what a lot of people are finally figuring this out. I assume we're going to get to Santa Ono and the sad story of the University of Michigan, but if only he had
you know what, Nancy, just so that I don't have to keep you waiting and begging, we're going to talk about Santa Ono right now.
Boy, nobody wants to talk about Mexico.
You have taught him a lesson. You have taught Saeed a lesson. He's not taking any chances anymore.
So can I answer Nancy's question though?
Bill, I'll tell you, I'm not sending my troops anywhere near Nancy just because of that.
Sorry,
Darcy.
But just to answer your question, Nancy, he didn't have any interest in pushing back because he led the charge to eliminate DEI, and he's on record this week as saying,
I know.
So yeah,
I don't think anybody quite realized that. I think he's sort of showing his, unless they really did a deep dive on it. But I mean, that letter that he wrote to, was it to the University of Florida community or what? The one that said basically, I'm on board with Ron DeSantis, and I mean that was like what?
I think it was to the Chronicle of Higher Education, which, by the way, is very nicely abbreviated as Che. But the fact that just to provide some context and background, I mean, here's the shortest tenured president in the University of Michigan history, Santa Ono, who was the sole applicant for the University of Florida in Gainesville, has now, it looks like it, accepted the position there. The first time that a University of Michigan president has lateraled to another public university. Most of them head up to either a private university and or an Ivy League institution. But Santa Ono, I suppose, is precedent setting in many different ways. But he had two interesting, I suppose, trysts with documents. One was this op-ed in which he said that DEI, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Darcy, started off as a good idea, but then derailed, and so he's disavowed himself of DEI. And then he also took his name off the list of signatories to a letter that was furnished by the American Association of Colleges and Universities supporting academic freedom. So he took his name off of that, apparently. That is not only quite a defection, but also quite a regression when it comes to his ideology. Thoughts?
Very disappointing. I mean,
but it's also just the havoc that he wreaked, that he leaves in his wake, I mean, this so-called our liberal institution, our alma mater, to be seen as such, to acquiesce, to not uphold the things, has kind of led the way on, at least in recent years. I mean, there have been protests to get him to do the right thing, of course. But
Darcy, don't you think it'll be interesting to see who the Board of Regents selects?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I think this is a tipping point for the University of Michigan.
Agreed. But it's also think about, that we elect our folks for those boards, and how much politics is playing a role in this equation there as well.
How so, Bill? How do you think it's a tipping point?
Well, I think that are they going to lean toward Harvard, which they like to think they're in competition with, and stand up to people like Trump and really become a force in higher education, or are they going to retreat and pick someone else who is going to not make waves? And I think it's a question of the University of Michigan's leadership. And I think if you historically look at the University of Michigan, even though I'm a Spartan, I'm going to say this. If you look at historically at the University of Michigan, they are the leaders in public education. There is not not another competitive university like the University of Michigan. And they've always been the leaders in higher education. They've been the leaders in almost everything until the last 4 or 5 years. And now they've retreated and they've kind of caved in politically. I think it'll be interesting to see what the board does in terms of their selection of their next leader.
Steve.
I don't think there's a chance that they will pick somebody that's going to be like Santa Ono or any of the other people that are not fighting with Trump. I think there's a much better chance of somebody like what's going on with Harvard. When Lee Bollinger when he was in charge, he was in the lead of everything that was liberal and political, and he never gave in to any of them. And I just think that the donors, I think that the graduates, people like us, that when he did that, there were an awful lot of U of M people that went nuts. And quite frankly, one of the things that I either read or heard as to why he left was that Mark Bernstein and Jordan Acker wrote that op-ed. I can't remember which newspaper.
It was Nolan Finley in the news.
No, but there was one before that.
No, Finley has nothing. These are two of the regents, though. I'm pretty sure they wrote something where they criticized him, and he's took it personally. So he says. At least this is what I either read or heard. But I honestly, Bill, I can't imagine they won't hire somebody more like Lee Bollinger than it's going to be another guy like this guy. Brady said this is the University of Michigan, for God's sake.
Yeah, look at the Free Press, and I don't remember who wrote it, and maybe there wasn't a byline on it. Referred to this not as a particular change, but as a strategic retreat to go to the University of Florida. And I think that that's probably true. I think he needed a different place to land because he knew he wasn't going to survive much longer.
Well, one thing we know for sure, there will not be a shortage of applicants.
Right.
So they'll have plenty of people to pick from. It's not like you're down somewhere,
But Bill, I mean, there's one thing about retreating to another prestigious university. I mean, Gainesville and the University of Florida are literally known as the swamp, and particularly with DeSantis there. I mean, I think it's also an abyss. Is the $3 million just simply a good way to insulate himself? Because it just buys a lot of cocktails?
Well, I think it's far more an issue of where he's going to be comfortable. He's likely to be more comfortable in Florida from a political point of view. I mean, I think he is aligned with DeSantis. I think that he'll find some great comfort there that he wasn't finding at the University of Michigan.
He used to be the president at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, and I can't imagine that was a bastion of conservatism over there. So
Western Canada, you never know, but
wow, what you could say that about maybe Victoria Island, Nancy, but not
not Vancouver. I'll give you that, but Alberta, Saskatchewan, Medicine Hat, etc.
Okay, your knowledge, your savant knowledge of Canadian geography is second only to that of Alex Trebek.
What is Moose Jaw?
Moose Jaw.
Moose Jaw. Yeah, I forgot about Moose Jaw. Yeah.
But Steve, I mean, you mentioned donors. I mean, who are the donors that we're talking about here? Because on the one hand, you've got what I would call your rank and file people who give thanks to the Alumni Association and all. And then you've got these heavy hitters like Stephen Ross and others, in the same way that Harvard has your Bill Ackmans and others. So when we're talking about whom the regents are worried about when it comes to giving, is it going to be that smaller group, or is it going to be the broader alumni network?
Well, there's no reason to assume that just because somebody gives a lot of money that they're more conservative. George Soros gives out a lot of money to a lot of different organizations. Nobody's accused him of being to the right or being conservative. So I think that that's a false premise to begin with. Plus, a lot of maybe the smaller donors, maybe they wanted to cuddle up to Trump, or they didn't want to have all the controversy. I just believe that this is the University of Michigan, and they're going to have a zillion good applicants, and the person they pick is going to be not someone who's going to be bullied by this asshole. That's my prediction, for whatever it's worth. I also didn't think the Knicks would win 2 games in Boston. So I take my predictions to the bank.
What a series!
Well, you have to remember too, there's a lot of individual donors that, and they do pretty aggressive push for individual donors, and people were responding and saying, you know, hey, I'm not giving because of the position you've taken. So.
Well, I mean, Steve, you've got the 3 C's going. You've got courage, candor, and chutzpah. I mean, why don't you put your, you know, we'll endorse you. I mean, and oh yeah, you played for Michigan. I mean, even Ono didn't do that.
A couple of years ago, right? It was just a few years ago.
Blink of an eye, my friend. And now that you've got a new, had to order it, flip phone. I mean, you are sort of inching your way back into the 21st century. There you go.
That'd be great.
Hey, Alan, why don't you go ahead and why don't we take a commercial break, Alan?
Okay.
Downtown Detroit.
Whoops.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Eric Sabria, your Wayne County Treasurer. If you're living in a home of a deceased family member and you're facing property tax foreclosure, the probate process can be helpful to you. If you file a probate petition and notify our office, the foreclosure proceedings will be halted during the probate process. Contact us at 313-224-5990 or email us at taxinfo@waynecounty.com. We're here to help.
You know, for those of you out there who keep track of this show's bloopers, that one was a freebie because there's so few of them. So knock yourself out, folks. Nancy.
I just want to, before we move on from the University of Michigan, I want to share a small anecdote from when my daughter attended and we went to the parental orientation day. And they put this guy up from the housing office to who was very funny. They were all very funny. It was really like a festival of smugness. And he taught us all the fight song, you know, Hail, all that stuff. And then he said, you know, most other schools' fight songs exhorts the team to fight and win, but only Michigan's assumes that they've already won and they're just sitting around waiting for the trophy presentation. He said that is the Michigan difference.
Steve,
let me just give you a quick distinction between what Nancy experienced taking the kid and parental this and that. When I was coming up there late August of 1966, my parents drove up. We were staying in West Quad. My mother never got out of the car. I got out had my gym bag and had a little something. My old man walked me up to the room, and he played there. He went to school there in the 30s. He pointed his finger at me. He said, "Son," he said, "you live in Ann Arbor. We live in Detroit. Don't be calling your mother for food. Don't ask her to send you any kind of stuff up there. If you want to have all that stuff, your mother doing that for you, you could have stayed home and played at Wayne." And he turned around and walked out. That's the last time either of them ever saw a place I lived in.
Wow.
Not that your children were spoiled, Nance, a little bit, but no.
No, I agree. And I've heard many people have similar stories like that. I mean, when I was dropped off at college, there was no parental orientation, but apparently today's helicopter parents need to be briefed on all this stuff. And so,
well, the fact that they have to learn to sing "Hail to the Victors" tells me something right there.
Well, it was.
This is not a fun nugget, but my late aunt is Annie LaRue Hurd. She actually was on the team that won the Pulitzer for the rebellion coverage, and so she grew up on a farm. Her and her sister were the only blacks from K through 12 in Milford. So when she went to U of M, they assumed she was white, and they put her in a dorm with a white roommate who proceeded to move out, and then she moved in with a black friend. So here's my U of M nugget.
Steve, does that constitute a birds and the bees speech by your dad?
I don't know, but if you knew my old man, and when he poked you in the chest, he always poked you in the chest, and all he ever said to me was, "And don't screw up." That was it. There was no, baby, I love you, all this and that. You know, just don't screw up. That was it. Piano, playing basketball, hitting baseball. Don't screw up. That was the extent of it, of the encouragement I got.
Bill,
you did okay.
Yeah, it worked out.
I was on off the rails.
Yeah.
So here's in 1973, I'm working at Michigan State University in the summer, and one of my many jobs was to get on this tour bus to give parents this tour around Michigan State University. This was a great gig because you could sit down and get paid for it. This was big time for me. We're coming around this party, and we've got this script that we always read. You know, to the left is Brody Cafeteria, the largest non-military cafeteria in the world, serving over 3. We get to Sparty, and I said, to the right is Sparty, the symbol of the fighting spirit of the Michigan State Spartans. And I added one little phrase. Tradition has it that he'll drop that helmet if we ever graduate a virgin from here. Not a laugh. Nobody laughed. I thought it was very funny.
I would have
found out when I got back to my dorm room that there was actually a man who was the dean of students. He was on the phone screaming at me. Did you think there might be some fathers on that bus?
Oh my God!
I lost that great job.
Why did they assume it was about a girl?
and Allan, I think, don't we have a photo of back when Bill
No. This is there you go. This was our going away cake for my daughter when she.
I like the going away.
Oh, not that one.
Now
you blame him. You would have thought of something like that, right?
Would you think that man would talk about virgins? I think not. Well, I mean, so Steve, when I went for orientation, and there was no parental orientation, and my parents certainly weren't going to go to it. We were at East Quad, and I remember when I got up there for the fall, I talked to my roommate who used to smoke about an ounce of weed a week. I'm like, yeah, man, orientation was great coming from Lapeer, and he was from my high school too. I said any free time I had, I went to School Kids Records, and I just was like buying vinyl. He's like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, what did you do for orientation? He says, yeah, I broke into Michigan Stadium and I slept with a girl on the M. I'm like, all right, I still win. I still have the albums.
And who knew?
Talk about Allan having a conversation with somebody about virgins. Let me tell you about that one. Well, speaking of something more local, we have, of course, the issue of Ethan Crumbley, and the Michigan Court of Appeals rejected the Oxford High School shooter's request for resentencing or to change his guilty plea. I'm assuming that this case is going to get sent up to the Michigan Supreme Court as well. But how does this then color the case, Allan?
Well, I mean, the Michigan Supreme Court just ruled recently that 19 and 20-year-olds, so I assume he would he got life without parole. But I guess the prosecution has the time or has the option of filing something to challenge any change in sentencing. But yeah, it's going to be pretty tough to for any judge to resentence him on anything other than what he's gotten.
Okay. I mean, it seems as though, I mean, these are efforts that are natural to be made. I mean, the guy was a kid, and efforts to go ahead and try to change what seems to be a permanent sentence of life without parole.
Short of, I mean, it could be resentenced like Rick Wershey got his sentence changed from without parole to life with parole potential, and so he could potentially get that, but it's doubtful the parole board would say, yeah, let's cut this guy loose. You know,
Steve.
I think I've said this before in this case. There's no way anything's going to happen now. You know, when it's happened so recently, and you have the families of the deceased. But down the road, when we're all dead and gone, my guess is 40 years from now, he'll be released. Something like that's going to happen. We won't know about it, but this is just a trend. I mean, the Michigan Supreme Court was really just ruling on things that the United States Supreme Court has talked about already with respect to the age, the size of the brain, and all that stuff. But nobody's going to listen to that right now, given the proximity to the homicides.
I think Rick Wershey should go into acting, and I think he should star in the remake of The Outsiders, so he could be White Pony Boy Rick.
Hey, that was one of my first interviews, Susan Hinton in junior high school.
How did that go?
It was the worst interview ever because I just asked yes or no questions. But I tried to write a story, I had nothing. So.
They won't accuse you of leading the witness there, Darci. Well, getting back to Washington. Well, actually, before we get to Washington, let's stay in the Detroit area. It looks like, thanks to our friend of the show, ML Elric, with some of his reporting this week, that there may be some issues facing and plaguing Kwame Kilpatrick about a particular text message that he had sent to State Representative Karen Whitsett. Any thoughts about this and his aspirations for a presidential pardon by Donald Trump? Allan?
I think it was actually what he had was a phone call that he left with the state representative, who somehow got in the hands of Bridge, Michigan, and then it was out there. I mean, first of all, I think one of the things, people aren't shocked that Kwame campaigned for Trump, considering that he commuted his sentence. He served about 8 years instead of the 28, or would have been probably 24 in the end. But it's a huge break. But so people were skeptical anyway, saying he's only doing it because he got this commutation. But when you find out that the pardon was on the table, that he did it with the promise of a potential pardon, then the credibility of him pushing and criticizing people in the Black community for automatically voting for a Democrat even is worse. I think, he's got a credibility problem. He's trying to be a minister. He's living out in Novi now. He's got 2 kids, a new marriage. He's trying to reset, but he still looks like the operator of old. I don't, and from what the state rep told Elric, Trump was pretty much like, yeah, I'll give him the commutation, but he needs to pay the money that he owes. And one of the reasons Kwame owes over $800,000 to the city of Detroit, Kwame was hoping that he could be, released to that through a pardon. So I don't know.
Well, first of all, I disagree that people are I think people were shocked. I think there are a lot of people who were disappointed and surprised that he would go to the level that he is. I mean, certainly some people say, well, okay, if you commute my sentence, maybe I'd do that for you too. But he didn't owe anything at that point. He didn't have to do that. So I think there are some people that were disappointed, disillusioned that he actually went to that extent. But, and you remember the letter that he wrote to Trump when he was trying to get out. He, compared himself to Trump and talked about how he was treated badly and so on and so forth. So, and they do seem to be, to some extent, kindred spirits. There's not much contrition. And I would say, I agree with most that the sentence was too long, especially considering what Blago got, not too long before that. I think he got 15 years for selling a congressional seat. But the key criteria for release is contrition, and it doesn't exist. So,
Darci, do you think part of contrition also involves making restitution? I mean, something that I guess he is a kindred spirit with the president, and maybe even with Christine Beatty from recent reporting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a key factor. But again, I think generally speaking, he doesn't think he did anything wrong.
And when you mentioned Christine Beatty, she owes about $78,000 to the city. She hasn't, and the Free Press did a story saying that she hadn't paid a dime in 10 years. It's interesting. She works for Thaw, which is headed by Santil Jenkins, a mayoral candidate. And I wonder about the optics of Santil Jenkins paying her, I think it's $109,000 a year, and having somebody on your payroll who owes the city of Detroit money while you are running for mayor. I don't know what the optics are on that. If right now, there was a poll that just came out with the mayoral race. Santil is slipping in the polls. She's not doing that great so far, at least poll wise. But if she were to make it to the runoffs, I think that might be an issue for somebody to raise.
That's just Steve.
I think there's 2 things. I think Kwame's stuff, Elric's article was kind of confusing. There was a lot of back and forth in it, but the combination of hypocrisy and arrogance that Kwame can show, it's almost astounding. And it keeps on going on. What Darci said is so true. Contrition. Are you kidding? There's never even been an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, let alone contrition. That's the first thing. The second thing, with respect to Christine Beatty, I can tell you from my lengthy experience in federal court where people have restitution, if you just make a decent monthly effort, and literally You can have a person with $3 million of restitution, and if they see you have a job, you can pay $200 a month, and everybody is happy with it. Everyone is fine with that.
$100 a month.
Yeah, and the fact that she hasn't paid even a penny, and I agree, this business with Santil Jenkins, if I hire her, I'm certainly going to at least pay attention. Does she owe any money to my city? And if she does, dear, you're going to have to make a little kind of an agreement here that I'm going to write the check to you, and you're going to write a check for $300 a month or whatever. So, it's not a very big deal in court to make small monthly payments. Everybody is kind of happy to see it. It's a little bit of contrition, as Darci would say, and you're making an attempt to do something about it. But to just go like this to the city of Detroit when you're working for someone from the city of Detroit, that's an interesting concept.
And the thing is with Beatty, to me, she had taken the opposite tack for so long. Like she did her time. Right. She kind of was low key. You know what I'm saying? She seemed to be more contrite, frankly. So I'm actually disappointed and surprised that she's not paying that money.
Could we go back to Kwame for a second? I mean, I think Kwame's fundamental problem is that he was raised to believe he couldn't do any wrong. Mm-hmm. I mean, Kwame just believed he was destined for this. And look, I think that in some ways it was good. You want to raise children with the idea that they can do things, but his mother raised him to believe that he was destined to run the city of Detroit, that he was and he believed it. He took it in. I don't think that's changed. I don't think that, I think that he believes if I did it, it couldn't be wrong. And when you're dealing with people like that, it's very hard. I don't know about any of you, but I've made some boneheaded mistakes in my life. One of the things I've done is not made the mistake again. I can't believe this guy's still texting stuff. I mean, Jesus, I would have gotten off the texting thing.
So wait a minute, Bill, you no longer are a tour guide at MSU and you don't use same joke again?
I've never been a tour guide. I've locked the doors so my mother can't get in.
I do want to put an asterisk by that, though. I think still there are a lot of folks who are, especially with Beatty, empathetic and feel like because of the approach she took early on, leave her alone. And also there probably are more people that still like Kilpatrick and still would love if he was in office.
Steve.
Let me just answer the question. The question that somebody put up there was, why would you not be back in jail for not paying restitution? Yeah, there it is right there. In general, 99% of the cases, restitution is separate from the sentence itself. Somebody gets sentenced to 24 months and you're required to pay back $78,000. You should pay that back as a condition of your supervised release. It is shocking to me. I suppose if she hit the lottery, let's say, and she got 10 million and didn't pay anything back, although now see, she's done with all of her time and her parole and everything. So the court can't bring you back to re-sentence you. You've already served your sentence. So that's the answer. Is that no?
So Darci, we had a viewer ask make the comment that if Kwame was to run again for mayor, that he would get voted back in. And this, I'm assuming, I think Jennifer Drake is saying this, assuming that he's running against not just Sri Tanadar. What do you think?
I think he would have a good chance. I hate saying definitively where anybody will do anything, but I do think that there are people who are more empathetic than you would expect and more supportive of him as well. So I think he would fare well regardless.
Okay, Allan.
I've gotten to know Kwame a little bit since he's gotten out of prison. He's a very likable guy. He's very charismatic. I think one of his problems is that he thinks he is the smartest person in the room, and he may be. But when you get collectively a group of people, they start to see through, and he still has a lot of cynics like ML Elric and some other people who just aren't buying into any type of, change. People say he's the same guy. And you'd like you root for him, like people like him, White Boy Rick, that they have learned their lesson. They're on the straight and narrow, but who knows,
Well, I can vouch for you. If he's ever in the room with Allan Lengel, he's not the smartest person in the room. So there you go. Nancy.
I was talking to a guy once who told me a Kwame story that he had heard from a member of his executive protection unit, his drivers, and he said the cop described him as the dumbest smart person you'll ever know. And he said, he thinks he's really got it going on, but he's he just does dumb shit, and arrogance is a form of that. So
I negotiated with Kwame on a couple of issues for a client, and I thought he was first of all, he's charming. He will charm the socks off you.
Very charming.
You got to check for your wallet when you walk out of the room. And I thought he was very intelligent, but his arrogance overcame everything. Yeah. His belief that if I want it, it's going to happen, I thought was his Achilles heel.
Mm-hmm.
Just an update on. Oh, go ahead, Al. Yeah.
I was going to say during the trial, he carried himself with a certain arrogance that I think Judge Edmonds was clear she did not like Kwame, and not only clear but particularly clear at the sentencing when he got 28 years, which I thought was excessive, but.
Well, just to follow up on one last story, the Supreme Court announced and held that it would allow the Trump administration to ban members of the trans community from the military. And what was your phrase for him, Nancy, for the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth? That's right, he's got a drinking buddy.
Yeah,
right.
And Hero. Yeah,
apparently
time drinking buddy, if not a morning coffee break drinking.
Well, apparently they're going to waste no time. The Secretary of Defense has announced that the trans community in the military has 30 days to self-identify. It looks like there's about 1,000 people who self-identify as members of the trans community. And after the 30 days, they will start going through medical records and, it seems, pull them out themselves. So, Joel, you are shaking your head on that.
Oh, it's so negligible. It's such a, again, this trans issue, it doesn't affect a whole lot of people. It doesn't really affect the military. It's just a culture issue to distract from whatever else is going on. It's a non-issue.
And these kind of distractions are what, this is what the vacuum that allowed the 9/11 attacks to happen. We were not.
Wait, are you going Pat Robertson and blaming the trans community for 9/11, Nancy?
No, what I'm saying is, it's like you can't be distracted by this crap,
No, it's a ridiculous distraction. It was during the election. Like the number of people impacted by the trans issue just isn't significant. It's not significant nationally, militarily, and otherwise. Economically, it's just a distraction issue to get people pissed off, and it works.
It is.
Well, given the current situation and status of the FAA and the Department of Transportation in this administration, I'm surprised there's not more planes falling into buildings, given the ineptitude that's going on.
Well, we have planes falling off of aircraft carriers.
Another one, that was great.
Yeah.
Did you? Anybody buying that?
The Velcro.
Anybody buying that?
The best joke I heard last week, it was not a Pope Chicago joke. It was, guys, I hate to tell you this, but the Orcas now have 2 F-18 Hornets. Look.
And orcas are really astute about hunting in coordinated patterns. So there you go. They might actually be more adroit at that than the Indian
comes
military
blasting out of the ocean like an ICBM.
Well, a sub-launched ICBM. Let's go ahead and be precise, Nancy. All right, Alan, let's go to our last segment.
Downtown Detroit, Robert Wells, Schmuck of the Week.
Okay, unfortunately, Barb had to leave us a bit early, so I'm going to go ahead and nominate or mention hers. Her Schmuck of the Week is J.D. Vance for threatening any people coming to the United States next year for the FIFA World Cup that they will meet Kristi Noem, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, if they stay in the country. This was his idea of a joke, but then again, he's the last public official to have met the Pope. So you can then go ahead and see exactly how toxic and perhaps lethal his form of comedy might well be. Anyways,
Our Lady of the Hair Extensions. So
I'm like you. I got a long list. But
by the way, who is the patron saint of comedy in in the Catholic Church?
That's a good question. I have no idea. I bet
George
a
Carlin?
Google would. Yeah. Okay.
St. George Carlin? Okay. Darcy.
My funniest joke I heard recently, what did the fish say when it hit the wall, when it ran into the wall?
What?
Damn.
Oh,
No.
Come on. That is great. Come on. Anyway, I have a long list too, but I'm going to go with Witset, actually, who now is, suddenly aware and astute about Kilpatrick after she campaigned for him. She's a Dino, she continues to prove how she shouldn't be in office as far as I'm concerned. And for her to be, woe is me, or I made a mistake. Come on. We expect better of our public servants on so many levels, hiding out in the leader's office, not taking action while you're in the legislature. And this is just the latest example. So she's my schmuck of the week.
That's a good one. All right. Steve.
Mine is Janine Pirro. It's probably easier to say Trump, but Trump is, of course, who we named it after, and I don't believe in making him schmuck of the week. But the fact that she's going to go through a confirmation process, and maybe all the Republicans will vote for her, but a lot of this stuff is going to come out that she has said over the period of time. And I think it's going to be really, really astounding. I mean, this guy Martin was as full of shit as anybody, but some of the things that she's done on the public stage, sitting there at Fox News, and the Democrats hopefully are going to scour through everything. And those hearings are going to be very, very interesting. And she's my schmuck of the week because she's a bitch to begin with. But she's my schmuck of the week for kind of ignoring that and thinking, oh, yeah, I'll just cruise through because there's more Republicans than Democrats. All it takes is one Tom Tillis, again, on the committee itself, and she doesn't even get a vote. So that's my schmuck of the week.
I wonder if they're even serious about trying to get her confirmed, or if Trump's just giving the finger to people, because she's got so much baggage there that there's no way she's going to, if this Ed Martin didn't get confirmed, she's even worse. I just wonder,
He may be doing the one interim after another because they don't need, the acting secretaries he was fond of. So maybe that's the play. I don't know. Oh, right. By the way, St. Lawrence is the patron saint of comedians.
Wow. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Is that would that be DH St. Lawrence or just St. Lawrence?
He was able. He apparently laughed and joked during the torture that led to his martyrdom. So
he is, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a boss move. That is. I mean, all right, Joel.
I'm going to go with Bill Belichick for his lovely relationship with Jordan. I think it's Jordan Hudson, not Jordan, is my guess. Tom Perkins' father owned a barber. He was a barber, so he would cut hair, and he had a lot of great sayings. And one saying he had is that there was no fool like an old fool, and I think that applies perfectly to Bill Belichick and his girlfriend. There is no fool.
What? She's 24, right?
20. It's 50 years difference.
She's the age of a grandkid.
Right, and she's controlling him. The interview that was embarrassing, but this is Bill Belichick. Nobody cares about his book. Who cares about Bill Belichick's book? But seeing him neutered kind of is really sad. And so he's my schmuck of the week. But I do want to give a shout out to Perkins' dad, who had a million great sayings, and that was one of them. I love that saying.
Can I bring up a Sophie Tucker joke that was once relayed by Bette Midler? It's in the spirit of St. Lawrence, since we're talking about St. Lawrence. That she said that she told her boyfriend said something like, when they break up, he's going to get a 20-year-old girlfriend. When we break up, I will get a boyfriend. And let me tell you, 20 goes into 80 a lot more than 80 goes into 20.
But Joel,
I mean, more than he's saying. Old fool. Okay.
Yeah.
Joel,
old fool. Yeah, exactly.
Didn't you hear that Bill Belichick was actually trying to save and comfort Jordan? Well, after she found out that she'd aged out for Leo DiCaprio's eligible.
Well, he does have a sympathetic shoulder, and he's always a great listener, and he's always compassionate, empathetic. Bill Belichick, that was his reputation. Yeah, it's a bizarre. It's just one of those like, what is going on here, man? It's one of those great things.
I can't believe it's news. I'm sorry. I can't feel sorry for him, and I can't believe it's news.
Yeah.
Oh, it's one of those like, oh my God.
It's like an instant internet meme. It said,
yeah.
I will show my son these pictures when he asks why he should study. And will show my daughter the same pictures when she asks why she should study. So there.
All right. Nancy, your schmuck.
All right. Mine is actually made me very sad because I am a baby boomer who remembers a commercial that used to run on TV when I was a little kid, and it was this peasant family sitting around in this very cold-looking hovel, eating some meager meal of potatoes and dirt, whatever, and they had their radio on, and it was playing. You could hear the person on the radio was speaking in some obvious Eastern European language, probably Russian, and then they're all kind of gathered around and listening to this, and then you hear the voice break through, and it goes, "The Drifters on Broadway," and just then they play The Drifters, of course, the great song, The Drifters on Broadway, and it's an ad for Radio Free Europe. And the idea was that was burned into my little brain at the time was that we are exporting freedom and the idea of freedom through the very cool medium of radio, which was a lot cooler back then. And we're sending American rock and roll out into the world, even though on Broadway isn't really rock and roll, to corrupt, to influence the minds of these people who are behind the wall of communism. So what happens this week? Our sepia-toned, newly appointed head of Voice of America, Carrie Lake, announces that having laid off the entire staff of Voice of America and Radio Free Europe and all the rest of them, she is going to contract with One America News, which is, for those of you who are not familiar, is the one that makes Fox look like 60 Minutes. And they're going to be the content providers for the Voice of America. Right. So instead of The Drifters on Broadway, we're going to have Matt Gaetz and that Chanel Ryan and the rest of these amateurs that are broadcast by that propaganda outfit, and it's a very sad day. So
amateur broadcasters, professional propagandists.
Exactly. So
right.
The sepia-toned Carrie Lake.
All right, Bill.
There are too many this week. They're just actually there's
so
many.
many.
For a long time. For about 100 days, there have been too many of them. But two that stand out. One is the state of Washington legislature that passed a bill revoking the privilege of priests to hear confessions. Well, revoke the privilege as to priests who hear confessions from child abusers, and domestic abusers. Not only did they revoke the privilege, but they required them to report it to the police. And, people who know what I've done for a living, I have fought against pedophiles and child abusers and abusers of women most of my career. That's been one of my areas of practice. I'm not a big fan. However, one of the things I know is that when someone goes to a professional, to a priest or to a lawyer and says, look, I've got a problem and I want to talk about this, that's a positive step. I happen to believe you can't fix a pedophile. I don't know what to do about that problem. But you don't want to stop these people from confessing and going and trying to get help. And this was a dumb law. I was proud of the Catholic Church, which I'm not always proud of, but I was proud of the Catholic Church who announced that they would excommunicate any priest who obeyed that law.
Good.
But the other one that I want to mention is a Republican, Anna Paulina Luna, a Republican from Florida, has moved to repeal the Patriot Act, which generally might sound like a reasonable thing to do. But I've been told, and I read a little bit about, this is a trend. You notice how they got rid of the executive order that allows business people to bribe foreign officials in other countries. Yep. There's a lot of speculation that this move is really an attempt to eliminate Title III of the Act, which prevents international money laundering and anti-terrorist financing. And the money laundering is a big issue now because guess who's doing a lot of that? So those are my two schmucks.
Well, you probably heard, Bill, about the Trump crypto meme coin.
I think it's all part and parcel of the same thing.
58 millionaires have actually made over $10 million each, but 764,000 people have lost money on it. So just to show you. Alan.
Thoughts and prayers. Sorry.
I got a couple. One is the Berrien County Republican Party is having a fundraiser tonight, and some of the guests are going to be January 6th people, and also 2 people who were acquitted in the Whitmer kidnapping / plot to kill her. They're raising money at the American Legion. The American Legion, when they found out what was going on, they tried to cancel the thing, but they weren't able to. And the other one is, since we have a little minute here, is Marjorie Taylor Greene.
She is at the top of her game. Klan Mom is now chairwoman of the DOJ subcommittee, which is supposed to cut costs. They had an important hearing titled Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports. That would be a big money saver. They had a meeting yesterday in which she used a clearly doctored photo that makes it seem like this guy who's in charge of U.S. fencing was giving the middle finger when, in fact, he was holding up 2 fingers.
Here displayed behind me is the post that Mr. Lefelt put up. Mr. Lefelt came in here today saying that this is game day.
One moment, a point of order, please,
You're
Madam Chair.
not.
Madam
Okay,
Chair, I have a point of order. The document that you have up behind you is a misrepresentation of the actual post. It appears that you're trying to misrepresent a witness here who you use subpoena powers against.
This is not Miss Stansbury. Miss Stansbury, this is not a point of order.
The actual picture.
Miss Stansbury.
By the way, a point of order. 2 fingers like that in England means the same as 1 finger here. But given that this is America, it's V for victory. All right. Thanks, Alan. Well, I've got 3 real quick. Number 1, the Trump administration that is seeking to bring the first group of white Afrikaners from South Africa that have been designated refugees next week.
I heard that. Unbelievable.
Apparently, they're under threat. The second is the Anti-Defamation League for saying that shareholders of defense contractors who've been criticizing the use of U.S. weapons by the Israelis is somehow anti-Semitic. But the cherry on the proverbial top of the sundae has to go to V.K. Balirao, 51-year-old Indian national, who was arrested at Mumbai airport for ripping out passport pages from his passport to hide trips that he was making to Bangkok from his family. Officials found pages 17, 18, 21 through 26 torn out in violation of the Passport Act of 1967. Because apparently in the 4 trips that he made to the Thai capital, he was getting too many happy endings. Well, he came home to a very unhappy reception by both the authorities, and I'm sure his family found out about it now too. So, VK Balirao, good for you, but you're the schmuck of the week. Anyways, thank you everybody for another great week. Thank you, Barb Ingalls, although she's not here with us right now. Thank you, Bill Seikaly. Thank you, Steve Fishman. Thank you, Joel Sklar. Thank you, Darci McConnell. Thank you, Nancy Derringer. And thank you, and with the last word always, Allan Lengel.
Drive home safely.
Have a great and wonderful weekend. Happy Mother's